Ignite your curiosity with Austin Next. We're watching Austin transform from a thriving ecosystem into a global superstar. With our host, Jason Scharf, we aspire to better comprehend the true nature of innovation. Together, we will uncover what makes a successful ecosystem and navigate the technologies shaping our future. Now let's dive into what's next.
Evan Loomis is an early-stage venture investor at Overmatch with a focus on critical technology, space, and defense. He is the co-founder of Icon, an Austin-based construction technology company at the forefront of revolutionizing human shelter through cutting-edge robotics, AI, and 3D printing. Icon made history by 3D printing the first home in the United States and has also entered into a notable partnership with NASA to construct the first habitat on the moon. Evan's professional journey began as an assistant to a former U.S. president and on Wall Street as an investment banker before he found his calling in startups. In 2006, he co-founded Wedgwood Circle, an angel investment group primarily focused on the media and entertainment sectors. 4 years later, in 2010, he co-founded Treehouse, a sustainable home improvement startup. In 2017, Evan co-founded Saturn V, a private equity fund building and investing in companies that help individuals, families, and communities thrive. Published in 2015, he also authored Get Backed, a book on startup fundraising by Harvard Business Press. Evan is a life member of the Council on Foreign Relations and a Kauffman Fellow. I hope you enjoy Evan and my wide-ranging conversation on building a unicorn, the moment we are in for critical tech, and how the Austin ecosystem fits into this puzzle. Evan, welcome to Austin Next.
Thanks, man. It's great to see you, Jason.
I'm excited about today. I think there's just a whole lot to cover in terms of just not companies, but new VC capital coming into Austin and different sectors that are really kind of exploding here, and then also what that means for the vibe. But I think I want to start off with the little company that you have a small history with, Icon, that I think is an amazing company, both from a mission perspective and a technology perspective. So for those who don't know, can you tell me about kind of the company, the technology, and what you guys were trying to accomplish or are trying to accomplish?
Yeah. For those of you that may not be familiar, Icon is a construction robotics company that was started in 2018, really to address what is commonly known as the global housing crisis. For me and my co-founders, we were just looking around Austin, looking around Texas, and it's not that hard when you look around the world, and it's debilitating when you see how many people don't have adequate shelter. And a lot of our friends at the time were moving to Austin. They were two incomes or one income that was pretty strong, and they were having a really hard time finding a house that they could afford. And so it started off as kind of like a little research experiment on the side. We were just like, what's going on here? And we looked at every type of methodology to build a house. And the one that had really never been tried, that has like radically transformed every other industry on earth, is kind of the holy trinity of innovation. And that's advances in robotics, material science, and software. And so one of my dear friends, John, let us use his just like a warehouse on the west side of town and said, hey guys, y'all can kind of tinker out here. And so we started 3D printing little wall sections, and then one thing led to another, and we were able to 3D print the first house in 2018, which is really incredible during South by Southwest. And so honestly, we'd kind of planned for everything but success. We were like really troubled by the problem of homelessness and housing affordability. And we thought we might be able to print like half the house and do like a big South by activation. And the printer just kept on going, and we printed the whole thing and put a roof on it and windows, and it became a thing. But every startup is a very humble beginning, and that was certainly our humble beginning as a company. And so since then, we've gone on to be able to build larger robots that build much larger homes, buildings, barracks. We're working with every branch of the military, other parts of the U.S. government, and we even have a contract with NASA for some really cool stuff that I'm sure we'll talk about later. So it's been an amazing ride.
It's interesting to hear, and I was love to hear the way you framed it versus the way I think it's commonly framed, which is you said it's a construction robotics company. And I always, the first thing that everyone says, it's the 3D printed house company. So how do you see the difference in the broader mission between those two things? Do you think you're going to go beyond 3D printing? Are there other technologies that can come into play?
Yeah, the first year we were like a 3D printing company, except it was not a desktop thing using plastic. We were using very large robotic systems to build entire houses, and so people kind of need nice boxes to put you in. And so our like cute box was, we're a 3D printing company, but that actually wasn't true. We were certainly leveraging advanced manufacturing and additive manufacturing, but the heart of the company is really a construction technologies company. And so we have intelligent machines that show up on a lot where someone's going to build a home or a building or some other structure. That's kind of the star of the show. Those robots are called the Vulcan system and the Phoenix system. If you were to kind of Google them, and they're just incredible. The other is artificial intelligence, and so we're using AI in very novel ways to design novel homes and structures, and we're kind of filling in the gap between home like desire that someone has, like I want to build a 3-bedroom home with 2 bath that feels like this and it looks like this, and we love big family dinners and we all these kinds of things. We can go from like design and desire all the way to delivery with our technology. And so calling it a construction robotics company is a little bit of a misnomer, and that is on me, but it's much more broad than that at this point. And I think it has to be, if you're actually going to do something as audacious as like solve the global housing crisis, it has to be a lot more than just like a single product line. It's got to be completely encompassing from like tip to tail.
So I feel like we've attacked construction before, and we've always been seeming to go in the other direction, right? There's the famous thing of like the Empire, and I'm going to have the dates wrong. The Empire State Building was like whatever 18 months it was built, and now these things take, or it's 2 years or 10 years and $1.5 billion to do a few miles of subway in New York. And I know there was the prefabbed house, time and building it in manufacturing and then shipping it out. I don't really know the status of that, but it doesn't feel like it ever kind of really took off. And so one of the things, and I had, Mike Maples Jr. from Floodgate on the podcast recently. So I kind of have, with his new book, Pattern Breakers, I kind of have him in the back of my head talking. What do you think about for Icon was kind of the key inflections that happened, and then the actual like non-obvious insights that made this possible versus as you said, we've talked about 3D printing before. We've talked about, AI design. So why is it different this time? And what are you guys bringing differently?
Yeah. The Empire State Building was built in 13 months, to my knowledge.
Even less than I thought. Yeah.
And isn't that crazy that we were able to do something that incredible at that time in history? And there's books on how they did it and why they did it. But that was a period in American history where there was like a belief and some muscle memory on like doing the hardest things possible. The Panama Canal is another one. Hoover Dam was another one. These like incredible mega projects. So I think we're actually going to get back to that. And I think Texas is the kind of place where like the hardest problems are going to be solved, because we're still the kind of like culture where like, cowboy up, let's go do some hard things. Here we go. We still have the frontier where it's like, go west. You know what I mean? So I don't think that is going to be a fixture in American history that we never get back to. I think we just need to recover some of that lost ground. But in terms of inflection points for Icon, we tried to raise money before we 3D printed the first house in 2018. Most people don't know that. Talked to a lot of investors, know a lot of investors. Hey, we're starting a company called Icon. We want to go solve the global housing crisis. How are you going to do it? Robots, advanced materials, software. Dead silence. No, nobody would respond to our emails. And some of these were my friends. I was like, come on, am I like freaking crazy at this point? And my co-founders, Jason and Alex, were probably feeling the same way. And I think we came to a moment where we were just like, they can't actually imagine what we're imagining and feeling right now. And we just have to go do it. And so the first inflection point was just doing it. And we did it in 2018. We did it in a matter of days, and it was freaking incredible. It was so magical to see. Like neighbors would come out to watch the 3D printer work, and they would get popcorn and like a 6-pack of beer, Coca-Cola or something like that. And so that was the biggie for us, that really got us started. And that precipitated us raising a seed round of about $9 million. The second major inflection point for us was the Department of Defense and NASA. Somehow, some way, maybe through Defense Innovation Unit or AFWorks, which was in Austin, or the Texas National Guard. There are a bunch of innovation divisions that were like, "Hey, what are you guys doing over there? We just saw you printed a smaller home in East Austin. Can you do a barrack or a building for us?" I'm like, "Yeah, that's a lot easier. As a matter of fact, we can." And so we won some early innovation dollars from the military, and a lot of key technologies have kind of emerged from military involvement early on. And so I'd say that was the second is like the government getting behind us and putting kind of their stamp of approval on our effort to say, like, this is not inconsequential to American competitiveness and American society. This is very, very important. And when you think about it, like, back up for a second, you have to own a home, and it's the most expensive thing you're ever going to own. And so if you as a can succeed here, not only are you revolutionizing the biggest market in the world, multi-trillion-dollar market, you're actually just making the fabric of our democracy much stronger because people have more capacity to save and to put their dollars in places that are working for them, as opposed to just dumping money into your house or rent or those types of things. So that was the second. And I would say the third is certainly the pandemic. Anything that was robotic, anything that was artificial intelligence, anything that didn't necessarily have to be intermediated by like lots of humans in the same place, just got accelerated. And so at that moment, I think in the 2020s, like we just like completely took off. So those are the three. I think like the non-obvious insights for us are nobody thought that it was possible to use advanced robotics and artificial intelligence to build a home. People who thought that was just from science fiction movies. And so the non-obvious insight for us was like, we just did it. And that's been like a big theme of our company ever since, is like, we don't talk about things, we do them. And then we announce them. And I think a lot of startup culture is like, the hype train of like all the stuff you're going to go do, and then you go do it. We kind of keep our cards close to the vest on what we want to go do. And I think that served us really well. So
there are 2 points I want to kind of bring together that you said there. One was back in the early part of the 20th century with the Hoover Dam and the Empire State Building, Pentagon Canal, we had the muscle memory. And then at the same time, then we talk about during the pandemic, and everything with the robotics, and we're able to, do things apart and build that in. And we've seen a lot of, outsourcing and manufacturing and these kind of the skills question of, do we have the muscle memory now to kind of bring a lot of that back? And you're seeing that some of the big semiconductor plants like in Arizona or the like, where they're having some talent issues and needing to kind of bring people in. Does AI and robotics, how does that fit in? Does it change the actual nature of the muscle memory, where we're going to be building things in such a different way that we're kind of starting over and the whole workforce has to learn an entirely new thing? Or is it a kind of an augment here where we can kind of get back to where we were in learning because we've got these extra pieces in place?
Yeah. I think the power of AI and the power of advanced robotics, those are just tools that are going to be in service of humanity, and in service of people that are trying to do things. And so what I think is going to happen, I think those powerful technologies are going to accelerate and augment our productivity capabilities in ways that are kind of unimaginable. Like we're not even in the first chapter of the book of what intelligent machines, AI, robotics, these advanced materials are going to mean for us in the future. And it's not just construction; it's going to radically transform every other industry on Earth. And so I think the muscle memory of the early 90s was just an incredible courage to try to do the hardest things and to get really, really smart about how to do it. Like the French had tried to do the Panama Canal, for example, and they failed. And there are a couple of innovations, one involving, taking care of the mosquito problem down there, that enabled people not to get sick so much on the job. But part of it is a cultural thing, and part of it is like a technological know-how thing. And I think the cultural part is there for us as Texans specifically. We're just having to learn to use these new technological tools that are going to give us the ability to do even more hard things in the future. So it's a tough one, but I'm a big techno optimist. I think we're going to figure it out.
Well, and it's we hear I've talked with them on the podcast. You hear like Sam Altman say, we think about the shrinking of the size of companies as possible, whether you have like the one button company or the one person company. And I think about manufacturing companies have really disaggregated over time. I think the major auto manufacturers, right? How many different companies have kind of broken out into the supply chain with the kind of advanced manufacturing, AI, robotics, things of a company like Icon. Do you see the companies kind of remerging into that full stack and building things from end to end?
Possibly. I think companies are going to optimize to solve the problems that they're going after in the best way possible. And so in our case, just speaking for Icon, we're treating the housing crisis like the Manhattan Project. Like we are gonna die trying. And for us, the best way to solve that is to be vertically integrated because we can't waste another minute. There are over 1.5 billion of our brothers and sisters in the world that don't have adequate shelter. If you saw what they lived in, it would make you cringe and like break as a man. And we feel that existential angst on solving the issue. And for us, three core values are like speed, velocity, and ambition. Courage, velocity, and ambition. And for us, like velocity has its own like set of incredible virtues. One of the things that we say internally quite a bit is like opportunities abound as they are seized. If you just move really fast, not recklessly, but incredibly fast and incredibly courageously, like all kinds of new possibilities open up for you. And I think in Icon's case, that served us really well. There were people that were working on advanced robots housing a little bit before us. Within the first year, we like way surpassed them just because those were some of the cultural values that we have. And so if we're going to solve the housing crisis in our lifetime, that's what we're optimizing for as a country or as a company. Then you have a set of things that you want to optimize for. And for us, vertically integrated, owning the supply chain from the materials to the advanced robotics, to the AI, to the software layer is very critical for us to do it in the next like 50 years. So,
and we talked about couldn't wrap it in the beginning. You mentioned a couple of times, you guys, it's very much an Austin story. It's very much kind of that Texas attitude, like this cowboy up. And one of the things that I've said, and, feel free to push back on this or if you agree, is I think that there is generational and like breakthrough startups have to have a ecosystem first principles fit. And so the example being like, if you want to make foundational AI models, you probably should be doing that in San Francisco, right? If you want to make the next great, cell therapy that's, coming out of a lab, Boston makes a lot of sense. When I think about kind of the core principles of Austin that I've kind of observed, it is a lot of the, merging of the digital and the physical, the atoms, bits, whatever kind of, buzzwords we want to use. And I think about the unicorns like Icon, that it is really kind of bringing those things together. And so, one, do you agree with the premise? And if so, I mean, how do you think that that's actually then played out for Icon?
I agree with the premise because a company is just a group of people that agree to do something together at the end of the day. And dense talent ecosystems exist in different parts of our country. And those talent ecosystems have an ethos. That ethos manifests with nonprofits, it manifests with startups, it manifests with all kinds of different things like that. And so I think Silicon Valley gets a lot of attention for the kind of ethos that it has. Austin and Texas have a unique ethos. Austin's mantra is keep Austin weird. Weird is wonderful in startup world because weird means you're doing something that's non-consensus. It's different. It's unique. And Texas has this feeling.
I think we've lost in the narrative recently how counterculture a startup actually needs to be. If it's much more consent. It can make money. I'm not knocking like, another mobile app, another SaaS company can't make money, but you need to be, I hate to use the word contrarian because again, that's overused, but almost just a little more counterculture to truly kind of be something different and change the nature of how we do things.
That's right. And certain cultures, certain pockets of our country are much better at dealing with the ambiguity of new, right? A lot of times new is rejected because it's new. It feels scary. It's threatening to the status quo. And that's one of the reasons why I think Austin, Boston, the Bay Area are good. It's like weird is welcome here, and I mean that as a virtue, because if you're going to do anything new, it takes a lot of courage. I mean, in the case of Icon, so a lot of my friends pulled me aside and were like, "Hey, I want to check in on you. Are you doing okay? You know, like you really going to try to like build 3D print little houses for tiny people?" There's this Zoolander kind of deal in their comments with like tiny houses for people who can't read. And I was like, "Yeah, man, I'm doing fine. Have you like looked around the world or you read the news about how many people cannot afford a freaking house? Like what, like, so there's a little bit of that, but Austin is also the kind of place that's like, hang in there. They may be onto something, but that incredible courage that entrepreneurs have, and they're all over the place in Austin, all over in Texas, of like doing something that's a little off, a little weird. That is the R&D division of our country. Like it doesn't exist in the government anymore. Don't wait on the government to come up with a big idea. Like we're not launching Saturn V rockets anymore that are built by NASA. Like it's the tiny humble beginnings with courageous founders and founding teams that are creating all these major breakthroughs that are providing just an incredible benefit to our society, both economically and security wise. And so, but yes, it does, like innovation happens in these like creative pockets typically. And those creative pockets give life to these new ideas, which are very, very fragile at the beginning. So that's Austin, weird, wonderful. Texas has another counterbalance to that, which is Texas is the Wild West. Like we still wear boots and cowboy hats, and we've got a rodeo culture. We've got oil rigs in West Texas and the Gulf. That's a really, really hard business. If you've ever been out there, it's like that's tough stuff. Those roughnecks are rough. There's a sense within Texas that Austin's just surrounded by the Wild West of our culture of like you can do anything. And my like hope for Texas in a lot of ways is like this has to be the kind of state where the most ambitious entrepreneurs come to do the very hardest things possible. And I'm not talking about SaaS, B2B API plugin software or whatever. I'm not anti-SaaS. What I am saying is a lot of the hardest problems that are going to be solved.
Different.
It's just different. It's different. It's different when your startup has a physicality to it, when it actually interacts with the real world. That's a different rodeo, so to speak. So hopefully that gets to the bottom of, I think, the cultural dynamics at play. And that like Wild West plus weird is an incredible combination, in my opinion.
Well, I think that's a great segue then is you've now, launched Overmatch Ventures. So talk to me a little bit about what's the investment thesis that, like, obviously we can pull a little bit out of what you've been saying, kind of what it fits there, but what's the investment thesis, stage, sector, check size? How are you thinking about things?
Yeah, I had this incredible experience being a co-founder of Icon with my co-founders Jason and Alex for the past 6 years and the amazing 500-person team that we have there. Along that journey, we were befriended by the FBI, which is great. And the part of the FBI's job is to help you as a company stay secure, to be aware that like, hey, there may be foreign actors or bad guys out there that want to take your trade secrets. And so we started having these monthly meetings with the FBI over the past 6 years, and it would go be like, hey, just you need to be a hard target. You can't let your crown jewels hang out there from an intellectual property perspective. And I started going to these meetings where the FBI was just kind of giving these brief overviews of like what's going on in the world, starting in 2018. And they're like, all right, here's what's going on in the world from our perspective, and here's how it impacts you. There are foreign governments that are trying to steal our stuff, and they're doing a really good job at it. They're stealing $500 billion a year of our most sensitive secrets and our hard work that inventors have come up with. It's a big number. There are certain areas that adversarial governments want. They are artificial intelligence, they're quantum sciences, they're advanced robotics. Hey, that's us, at Icon. There are certain types of advanced materials, there's hypersonics and all these other sectors. And as an entrepreneur that was innovating within advanced robotics and artificial intelligence, I just started connecting the dots a little bit between like what the national interest was pointing to, which is the FBI was saying, hey, these are the most important industries that are really going to define the next 50 years for our country's economic engine and security. And so I would leave meetings like that, just being inspired that the FBI is kind of helping private sector companies, large and small. And then I'd meet with a founder that was working on a quantum sciences startup, and I'd be like, no way, this is important. Like the Uncle Sam wants you to win. Did you know that? I'm kind of making it sound cheesy, but I think you get the point. And over the past 6 years, I just started investing on my own in companies that I thought were really inspiring, that were solving hard problems in the national interest. That converted over into me doing just some SPVs, special purpose vehicles. So I'd email some investor friends and say, hey, I just came across this amazing company called Chaos Industries or Saronic or True Anomaly or Inflection. I think you ought to check this out. This is amazing. Here's what they're doing. Here's why it matters for our country. And I had enough investors that were like, all right, buddy, you've obviously got a lot of deal flow. Congratulations. I also hate K1s, which is the return you get each year. Can you just raise a fund? And I was like, you know what? This is actually a time of my journey when I was transitioning out of Icon, just joining the board. And I was like, you know what? I probably need to raise a fund. And so the fund kind of got provoked into existence, so to speak. And that was really the birth of Overmatch. And so what is Overmatch doing? We're a smaller fund. We're 75 million in size. We're focused on 3 areas: deep tech, defense, and space. Our kind of sweet spot is like pre-seed, seed, and Series A. And everything we do before we write the check, like the linchpin question is, are 2 superpowers going to fight over this technology or not? Is the free, or to say it another way, is like the free democratic societies of the world going to be at odds with the autocratic regimes of the world over this type of technology? And does it matter for like global power and global stability? And so that's really our laser focus. And so our hope with our fund is that we can invest in certain types of capabilities that give America overmatch against our adversaries, and really help our country thrive and flourish.
So a lot of the areas that you talked about, I feel like have had a big, I don't even say resurgence, but like just a surge, right? Like defense tech has become something much more recently than say, when the birth of Boeing and Lockheed and all of them. Is it that we were blind to this as a startup opportunity? Were there technology inflections? Were there more macro inflections? Did it take companies like just SpaceX, Palantir, and Anduril to break through it and say, hey, we can actually have startups in this space? Like what was the change that now suddenly we're in this kind of era of defense tech?
I think it's much broader than defense tech. I think people like to put defense tech at the front and center of it, but it's much more broad. I would say deep tech in general, like or the U.S. government calls it critical tech, is really at the center of this conversation. But in the case of defense tech or space tech,
let's take a step back then. How do we define like deep tech and critical tech? Because that can be extremely large from a critical perspective in terms of like the thesis, to just in some cases hard tech and critical tech just meant capital intensive.
Yeah, well, it's funny. Founders and venture capitalists call it deep tech, and the U.S. government calls it critical tech. So the U.S. government says these technology areas, AI, quantum sciences, advanced robotics, advanced materials, are critical to the United States. VCs, founders call it deep tech. So it's kind of the same thing. And depending on who you're talking to, you just have to like switch up your words so they know what you're saying, so to speak. Yeah, deep tech tends to involve atoms, not just bits in general, but a lot of deep tech is like artificial intelligence is deep tech, so, and that is software, chips, deep tech, microelectronics, certain breakthroughs in nuclear energy, deep tech. And so it's, I think, in health tech and SaaS, and a lot of where I think the Bay Area got its start. Most of those are probably deep tech at one point, but deep tech tends to be kind of the frontier of what's new that's a little bit farther away on the horizon. And so I think a couple things changed for us that have accelerated deep tech. One is, if you've read the news the past 6 to 7 years, not a day goes by that something doesn't happen that's like front and center, that feels like America's power position is waning. And when America's power goes down, our power projection, our authority in the world, our voice, our influence, our diplomacy, bad things start popping up all over the place. And it's been a weird, odd game of whack-a-mole the past 6 years, as America's power has gone down. And so founders read the news just like anybody else. And in a lot of ways, they're responding to this problem that we have as a country. It's like, okay, America's power goes down. What happens? Russia invades Ukraine. What else happens? Hamas invades Israel. What else happens? The Houthis in Yemen start launching rockets all over the place, like hurting our navigation of the seas. What else is going on? I mean, you can go down the list. Venezuela, are they going to go after Guyana? And all that. And so, like, I think because of the power drop, the entrepreneurial ecosystem and the government have kind of answered the call by trying to create new capabilities that are going to help us secure ourselves, play better defense, and then have a better offensive capability that is going to bring like a more sustainable peace to the world. And so there's one way to interpret what's going on, which is like army missiles, bombs, kinetics to the teeth. And it's not that. I think America's just trying to get to a place where they have like a credible deterrence, because we want the peace, and we want to like re-secure the peace that we've had really for the last like 50 years. And we're kind of losing that a little bit. And so I think we're playing a little bit of catch up right now.
So if you are thinking about the thesis as what are these two superpowers, are going to, or the two ways of thinking you're going to fight about, where do you think, because we started with this without, the FBI coming in and, hey, you got to harden, people are trying to steal. Where do you kind of come in on the kind of the open source, closed source debate when it comes to some of these types of technologies? And obviously that's a very large question.
Meaning like foreign investors investing in our technologies?
No, I mean like the whether you have like open sourced AI versus the the closed sourced AI, right? So the Meta Llama versus the open AI path forward. And the arguments is I hear them is, okay, the open source is that obviously the foreign adversaries can access them too, but we're going to be enabling our innovation ecosystem to move that much faster. And so that's the pro on that side. And obviously the pro on the closed side is we're going to stay ahead and be locked down and not give them access. And that's going to keep our edge. And you can obviously take the reverse of each of those.
Yeah. I think certain types of technologies need to, we need to be very judicious on how we open up the Komodo to those technologies. And we're seeing that in certain types of semiconductor chips. And so we're not closing that. We're just limiting access to those powerful chips that are going to create those powerful AI models that might inhibit our ability to lead in the most important technologies in the future. And so there's not like a one size fits all here. Certain technologies.
It depends is the answer to almost every question.
it really depends. But I think in general I think as a country, our posture of having like free people working on problems, and those problems being having a lot of people to like work on those problems together, and like being a little bit more open, has served us really well. I think there's just a very finite amount of technologies that we've been taken advantage of. Like we gave unfortunately a lot of our key satellite technologies to other countries that now hate us. We just have to be more judicious and kind of wake up a little bit. I think after the Soviet Union dissolved in early 2000s, we just didn't have anybody that wanted to like take us out from a peer perspective. And now we're in a very different world where, let me say it a different way. If an alien landed on Earth and they were like, what's going on here? My answer would be, there's two superpowers, one called America and one called China, and they're fighting over the same technologies. And economic competition is reshaping the world order. And because of it, you've got a cluster of countries that are free and democratic, and you've got like 5 to 7 that are autocratic and restrictive. And there's a jump ball over the next 50 years on which operating system is going to win. Is the world going to veer towards autocracy and secrecy and coercion and surveillance states, like North Korea and China, and you can go down the list? Or is the world going to move towards a more open and free way? And so there's a lot at stake here in this like techno-economic race, culturally, politically, diplomatically, and I don't want to put startups or venture capital at the center of the competition, but they've got a profound role to play in how this story unfolds over the next 50 years, which is one of the reasons why I'm so excited about like backing wonderful, virtuous people that are going to develop the capabilities that are going to create prosperity, create security for us and our allies.
Well, if you're thinking at the earliest stage, you said you're pre-seed, seed, and A, and I know that you said like the government comes out and here's our critical technologies list, and China comes out and has their critical technologies list. How, let me put it this way: governments have been generally bad at predicting the future, especially when it comes to technology and technology impact. How do you think about and keep your lens open for technologies that are not on the list that come kind of through and you say, you know what, this is going to be the jump ball?
What a great question. I think one of the riddles of being an early stage investor is suspending your like belief or disbelief about a certain category that you're looking at, and being open to being wrong. Because it's often true that like all the experts are wrong on a certain technology, and we're terrible at predicting the future. I think as an early stage investor, you've got to be aware that there's like incredible biases just in your brain about like, oh, AI is hot right now, let me get more AI. And I think the best investors are highly contrarian when it comes to hot or not game right now, and they end up doing things that are a little off the beaten path and a little bit weird in venture capital correlates to 100 plus X returns. Census is like 5 to 10X. And in venture, you have to have those like crazy outliers. And you just have like constitutionally, you have to be open to being wrong. And you have to have like an incredibly high tolerance to ambiguity, because a lot of times the world's most transformative ideas sound stupid. It sounded really, really dumb to my parents in 2017, 2018, when I told them I was going to 3D print a house. They're like, I love you, honey. I'm so, what I mean? There's like this like, they're just sad. And that's how most new things are, until like the Overton window like catches up to them. And then now it's like, oh my God, this is so obvious. And so that's kind of how I think about that.
So then how do you maintain the critical contrarian eye as we start having the positive aggregation effect? So like we talk about that, like Austin's turning into a defense hub, a critical technology hub, like the types of things that Overmatch is keen on focusing on, is Austin, I think, is really starting to become that special sauce. So then you're getting a lot of things coming through. And then how do you think about, well, one, I would think, again, we talked about earlier, the first principle fit, that it's good that we have those aggregation effects. It's good that you said it's a group of people kind of coming together, but then you start also having probably more, more stuff in the kind of bump on the curve and less, and then harder to find kind of that tail end generational 100x stuff. So how do you think about the growing as a hub, which is a good thing, but then maybe you got to dig through the hay a bit more?
Specifically for startup ideas?
Yeah, just kind of things become, I think, consensus maybe quickly, especially given the adoption curves. I mean, we think about, we talk about like Instagram, took X amount of time, and then like each of these things going faster. And then ChatGPT was like 100 million people in 5 days. So we're seeing adoption curves, ratcheting up. Obviously, critical tech is not the kind of same thing, but with that kind of increasing adoption or increasing hype cycle, I just wonder how quickly we converge on consensus, maybe even be the wrong consensus in a technology sphere. We can say about what's going on in like AI, and so how do you kind of pull back from that, especially given ecosystems growth and leaning into a particular sector or sphere that we're getting really good at it, right? Like it's starting to really grow here. It's starting to be a key thing here. And then all of a sudden it's like, oh yeah, well, we need what we've seen in Ukraine, we need these types of drones. So suddenly there's 15 of those types of drone companies, right?
Yeah. I think one of the benefits about having a clear thesis is you're looking for innovation in a few different areas that are like massive markets, and they're undergoing rapid change. And the benefit of that is, like, just to use your drone analogy, I've seen 20 drone companies over the past few months. And so there is consensus there, but sometimes one of the drone companies is like, everybody's doing this, but we're doing this. And you're like, that's interesting. You know what I mean? And so actually sometimes having a comparative set and comps helps you understand like the insights a little bit better. And then sometimes and so a lot of times these technologies emerge as like a flock of geese that are just like, here we are, here come the drones, humanoid robots, here we go, or here come all the LLMs, here we go, Gemini, Grok. You can kind of like rattle off all the names. That's typically how innovation works. You can't do very well in venture or as an entrepreneur when you're playing that game, because it's inherently reactive. You've got to pick up on the signal. You've got to have a very clear thesis about where the future is headed. And when you see the signal within the noise that's very, very faint, be it a new startup, a founder that's possessed to go solve a hard problem, that's where you've got to enter. And it takes a lot of courage for the founder, and it takes a lot of courage for the investor to enter at that level. Let me give you an example. One of the first investments that I did a few years ago was into a company called Venus Aerospace. They had a radically different paradigm for the future of rocket propulsion. And they were developing what's called a rotation detonation engine. Okay. It had been theorized for a really long time in scientific journals from the 50s. And one of the founders, Andrew, was like, I've read all the scientific journals. Everybody's wrong. Like, you're actually never going to deliver the goods on just liquid propulsion to get to the kind of efficiencies we need for hyperlogistics, global transport. And I know I can go build this engine. And I was like, okay, let me call DARPA. So I did some calls with DARPA, their hypersonics division, who had been working on this problem for quite some time. DARPA said, it's a miracle. DARPA doesn't do miracles. DARPA does DARPA hard. And not only is it one miracle, it's 3 miracles. They need to solve the engine. They need to solve the cooling. They need to solve the comms, all this kind of stuff. And I went back to one of the co-founders, Andrew and Sassy, their husband and wife team. They're amazing. And I was like, DARPA said it was a miracle. Is this a miracle? And he goes, no, it's not a miracle. Let me show you why. And I can't prove it yet because I need money to go build the rocket, but I know I can do this. And with this engine, we can get anywhere in the world in 1 hour, and we can go Mach 9. It's going to be amazing. Just like the movie Top Gun Maverick, like that's Mach 9.
That's immediately where my head went, actually, when you said
I know.
that.
Don't go Mach 10, but go Mach 9.
10, after 10, we see problems happen.
Exactly. Yeah. Tom Cruise ejects and lands in Kansas or something like that and gets arrested, court-martialed. So, like, I believe you. And I actually believe that DARPA may be wrong on this one. It's not a miracle. It's just really, really hard. And let's go. And so we're the first check-in. Fast forward a year or two, I get a text from him like, we did it. We did it. Like, the engine worked. It's amazing. And now it's consensus. Okay. So they're getting picked up in the Air Force and Defense Innovation Unit and all this kind of stuff. And that's where you have to succeed if you're investing at the earliest stages of venture. Or stories like Venus Aerospace.
So taking Venus as the example, then, would you say that the characteristics of the founders and talent in deep tech and critical tech are different, or is it because we require change, drastic change, that it's just similar to any, looking back, generational breakthrough type of startup? Or is there something in deep tech that you need a different kind of talent and founders?
I mean, in traditional tech, you have more software engineers, and in deep tech, you have software engineers, but you need more people that are like polymaths across a few different verticals: physics, astrophysics, software engineering, literature, history. These like solving these problems involves multiple disciplines, and the types of founders that typically enter deep tech, they've got, this isn't always true, but I think it's mostly true. It's a harder deal. It's harder to build software and hardware and make those things work together. And the types of teams you build are different. And just use the case of Icon for a minute. We have a software development team, a design team, an architectural team. We have an ops team. We have mechanical engineers and electrical engineers and machine vision people for on-Earth capabilities and off-planet capabilities. And that is you're cooking with gas when you're building a startup like that. That's a different journey. It tends to be a little bit more capital intensive, and it's a little harder.
More capital intensive.
Yeah. Well, you look at the most capital intensive startups, NVIDIA and SpaceX, they're doing pretty well. There's a lot of money to be made there, but they take a little bit more courage to start because your upfront costs are higher in general.
Well, it's funny. Those are, I think, two perfect examples because, as you said, they're doing well and they're both still founder led. So is there something different when you look, let's take I think it's the Starliner and the situation with Boeing right now as we're recording this. The astronauts are, I know they don't do this, but they're still stuck in space. And I think we're going to end up having SpaceX having to go get them. Is it, when we see the Boeing and its transformation over the years, is there something about these types of deep tech, hard tech companies that require the kind of still founder mindset to keep going? I mean, TSMC, I think, is still founder led. Someone can correct me if I'm wrong on that, but it still has that kind of mentality.
Yeah, Jensen is the CEO and founder, and the business is doing great. I don't think that's always true because you can look at Apple Computer and make the opposite argument. Gwen Shotwell is running the day-to-day at SpaceX. Elon is a very ever-present fixture in that company, but you've got SpaceX and Tesla and Boring Company and Neuralink and all those types of things. You can't possibly, unless Elon has like humanoids that look like him running around, managing these companies. One human can't.
He solved some things already. He's just slowly rolling them out to everybody.
Exactly. So I don't know if you can extrapolate founder-led as correlating to like the craziest outsized returns, but typically the kind of founders that you want to back are the people that are called to solve like a really, really hard problem. And if I can just brag on my co-founder at Icon, I mean, Alex and Jason are amazing, but I'll just pick on Jason for a little bit. You've got a guy, I've known him for over 20 years. He's one of my best friends. He got his career working in a homeless shelter in Boulder, Colorado. He spent the night in the homeless shelter with hundreds of people, waking up in the middle of the night, letting people in, serving them. And then he's like, you know what? There's a problem here. Then he went and became a green builder in Boulder and learned how to build sustainably. And then he and I co-founded a company called Treehouse that ended up not working, unfortunately. And then we started Icon. But this like, you trace back to the root of it is like an incredible heart for humanity. Like the kind of person that is willing to go put themselves into a non-secure environment and spend the night at homeless shelters is also the kind of person that's going to go build a business that's going to solve this, because the amount of pain that's required to go build one of these companies, and I don't know Jensen at NVIDIA, and I've never met Elon, unfortunately, but you can look at some of the interviews. The pain threshold is through the roof. And if you're not called to a certain industry to solve a problem with your life, you just won't be able to tolerate it. You're just going to give up. Life's too short. And so I think for the Jason Ballards of the world who have been at this issue for a very, very long time, like those are the people that end up like transforming the world because they've stuck at it for so long. And it takes a decade to kind of get your feet underneath you as a startup, so.
it's funny because I do think that the definition of an Austin startup is really kind of coming together. And I have, and this is not me trying to, blow smoke. Yes, but I've kind of said, Dell was representative of kind of like the first phase of Austin, and Icon, I think, is very representative of kind of like the next phase of Austin being the, convergence of technologies and very mission driven, right? And I think about the companies that are succeeding now are kind of really falling into that mission category. How do you see the Icons, the Overmatch Thesis, and the Austin vibe kind of coming together? We talked a bit about the weirdness as being a vibe, and I think this is one of the things. And you and I talked a little bit offline about this, but then we have kind of some of the stuff recently, like with South by and some of that tension. Where do you see kind of and then also at the same time we've had the huge migration of everybody kind of coming in the last 4 years, myself included. So where are you seeing the vibe of Austin right now?
I think the vibe is mixed. I'll start with the positives. You may start with the positives and the negatives. I'll start with the positives.
We'll make it the sandwich, right?
We'll make it a sandwich. Good news, bad news, good news. That's a great way to deliver anything if you are in management. What do we have going for us? After the pandemic, Joe Squared moved here, Joe Rogan, Joe Lonsdale, and the world's most important entrepreneur moved to Austin, Elon Musk. That was a big deal. People, I'm just using them, those three as a representative set. There's a lot more wonderful people that are coming to Austin. Brought a posse of startup founders and investment know-how and ambition to our town. So that's incredibly positive. Like SpaceX is now moving here. That's crazy. Tesla is already here. Twitter, X is going to move here as well. It's like, that's awesome. It's going to be great for our ecosystem to get all those incredible engineers in Austin. And they're working on very meaningful problems. I think media, space exploration, transportation. It's not in Detroit. It's in Texas. It's in Austin. These are incredible. Joe Lonsdale with 8VC, he was like the first mover with like a major VC fund to say, I'm out of California. I'm going to Texas. It's a big deal. He still has an office in California, of course, but that's a big deal. And I think a lot of other folks have followed suit. There's Ensemble Ventures here. There's Iron Spring. There's Overmatch now. There's a bunch of incredible people. On the government side, Army Futures put a flag here. They didn't have a lot of kind of authorities for the first few years, but now they're getting some authorities and some capital. Defense Innovation Unit has an outpost here. AFWorks. So there's this, and then all the ecosystem players, Booz Allen Ventures, all those folks are here. Geez, you could have made this stuff up 5 years ago. If you told me, if we were kind of going back in time, you're like, hey, Evan, here's what's going to happen in the next 5 years. The world's most famous podcaster and comedian, Joe Rogan, is going to come. The world's wealthiest person and most ambitious person is going to move here. I just feel like, Jason, you're nuts, but it happened. And it's so good for our city. I know sometimes these folks get politicized, but taking the political stuff out of it, it's awesome. All right, that's the good news. What's the bad news? I think I think anytime there's a cataclysmic change in the city, there are people that dig in their heels in general. And we have a little bit of that they don't want change. They want the glory days. That they want to keep Austin weird. What Austin weird means to them is a sleepy college town with hippies and hipsters and dudes with fanny packs and hanging out, feeding their dog. I'm trying to create a caricature. Nothing wrong with fanny packs, nothing wrong with dogs at all. But it's kind of like really like a no growth mentality. Like we want it like it always was. And it's annoying that I can't get my latte in time. Okay. That's not good. Another thing that has really irked me specifically is Austin has been the kind of place that celebrates and wants to be a place where hard problems are solved in deep tech, but also defense and space. Was South by's refusal to allow Army specifically to sponsor during South by. And I don't know all the details, but that was one of those things. Was like, that's a weird part of Austin that just reared its head in a way that I think is incredibly disrespectful to the men and women in uniform. These are the kinds of people that have raised their hand and sworn to get shot at and to potentially die on behalf of our government. Like we tell them that they can't sponsor South by Southwest Interactive. It's like, you've got to be kidding me. You've got to be joking me. And so for all the wonderful things that are happening, we still have, I think, some issues that we're still dealing with that are like the underbelly of kind of like a no growth mentality, or just kind of like I don't even know what the mentality is. Maybe Jason, you can probably like shed some light on here. Maybe I should ask you the question, but I don't know what's going on there specifically, but something is happening. And because South by has been really quiet about this, something happened behind the scenes where they made that decision. And I would just love to know like why and how they made that call, at least from my perspective as an Austinite.
Yeah, it
Any
was.
thoughts?
As I said, I know nothing beyond the emails and the things that have kind of gone out and the Rolling Stone piece. And I do, and I may not ever get invited to South by again after saying this, but I do find it interesting that, I think that I saw something about, I put this out on Twitter or X, in 2017 is when I think the defense connection started with stuff like Lockheed. And when Ukraine happened, there was there was no any sort of issues. And it just kind of started when stuff with Israel happened this last year. So, and the particular protests around that, and people are, of course, allowed to protest. I have no problems with that. And so it's a decision that South by decided to make, and will be very interesting to see if how that all plays out over what the panels are, what companies are invited, and what we see in March. And one of the things that we've seen actually is what I've found really interesting about Austin, and my sense is, again, I've only been here 4 years, but my sense is this has always been an Austin thing, is in many other more stagnant places, you kind of have the people who are doing something and the people who aren't doing something, and that's it, right? Like we're in, and maybe I'm not doing, I'm complaining. And in Austin, there is still very much that kind of growth entrepreneurial, and this may be true in the Bay too, so I'm not sure, a mindset of like, well, I don't like A, I don't like B. Okay, fine, I'll just do it myself, right? And then this go and build type of mentality, and it's everything. I mean, we talk about startup culture, but it can be in whatever, in anything from speaking of like Joe Lonsdale creating the University of Austin, right? I'm going to go build a new school. So I think that to is something that just I think is innate in Austin, and so I think we are in a time of change for the city, which was jokingly, I think it was 6 a.m. that put this out or something. There's like an article from like the late 1800s in Austin complaining about the boom town and all these people going. So it's like, okay, so the two constants in Austin is change and people complaining about change. Got it. That's never true. That's been never any different. But I do think that one of the interesting things about the last 4 years, given the people who have moved here, is, take Joe Rogan. He came here and built the mothership and pulled in all these comedians. Like the ability for these individuals to enact large scale change, and it's not just the movement of individuals in that broader sense. So I think we're in a moment to see a lot more institutions and new groups and new networks kind of come around. And I think part of that also is just a lot of the old institutions, meetups, groups, whatever you want to call all these things. Many of them took a hit during COVID and didn't recover. And so I hear a lot of people say like, oh man, it wasn't, the meetup culture, this wasn't as good as it was in 2017, 2018. And they kind of point to some of these things, but then but there's all this new stuff that's kind of popped up in the vacuum. So I think we're in this kind of non-settled period. And of course, a lot of the ambiguities you kind of send, there are people who like that and thrive in it. And there are people who are a little more, I don't like this. Like, just tell me how does it all lay out?
That's fair. And, to be clear, like Icon is incredibly indebted to South by. That's where we got our start. And these things are mixed. And I think with we'll pick on Google for a minute. Like with the Google Maven project, when that emerged, and there's like protests inside Google that says, "Hey, we're not going to work on anything defense and intel related." Within all these things, there's like this rebalancing, either new institutions that are created or just kind of this like, "Are you kidding? Google, come on. Like, what other country is more free and more prosperous and more like, name a country that you would want to serve more than the US government. I don't know. I'm just kind of using them as an example. And so you have all kinds of institutions that emerge in a new ethos. And I think a lot of the, like Andrew defense ethos, the true anomalies, these like really interesting, the chaos industries, these really interesting companies that have emerged. Part of that culturally came from that like cataclysmic moment with Google Maven, where they're like, oh, we need to go build something new. We can't rely on the big tech companies to go build the most important products for the government at that point. I think Palantir is another great example too. So anyway, I'm optimistic. I don't think institutions are in decay. I just think there's some quirky things that are going on that are probably going to autocorrect over time. And it's Austin. It's like our city is like divided 50-50 roughly on like political ideology. And that's like an awesome thing in my opinion. It forces you to like work through your actual issues. So
yeah, compromise, people working together, dogs and cats, singing.
That's funny.
Evan, this has been great. I always end with the same question then. What's next?
I think Austin is going to be the center of America for working on the hardest problems, period. We have, just to revert back to what I was saying earlier, we've got the right amount of weird. We got the right amount of Wild West. We've got the right constituents, big universities, Texas A&M, University of Texas, Rice, a bunch of others that are going to create these incredible engineers. We have some of the most important companies in the world. Icon, SpaceX, Tesla. Like, this is ours to lose, and I just don't want to lose it, And so I would hope that the snowball that was put into effect many, many years ago when the semiconductor industry came to Austin and gave birth to Dell and gave birth to all these incredible businesses, like people look up and they're just like, wow, this is like a 10-year overnight success story. And it's like, it's not. This has been a big snowball that's been building for a very, very long time. And we're incredibly indebted to the Admiral Bobby Inmans of the world that kind of made things happen back in the day. And so I just want our ethos to be like, if you want to do something hard, welcome to Austin. Let's go. So that's my hope for the city. We're gonna have our issues, but we can solve them. We can solve the housing crisis. We can solve, becoming an interplanetary species. We got this. It's Texas. So here we go.
Cowboy up.
That's right.
Evan, thank you so much for joining.
Thank you, buddy.
So what's next, Austin? We're glad you've joined us on this journey. Please subscribe at your favorite podcast catcher, leave us a review, and let your colleagues know about us. This will help us grow the podcast and continue bringing you unique interviews and insights. Thanks again for listening, and see you soon.